welcome to vlog number, I don't know what vlog number I'm on, so I'm kind of recording these a little out of order, but I do want to talk about Kendare Blake's final book in the series, Five Dark Fates. And so this week I'm going to be kind of talking about fantasy in my overall thematic idea of YA good versus evil. This is the last book in a 4-part series, but then there is also a supplemental piece called Queens of Finburn. Blake is a relatively new YA author, so I think it might actually help to summarize the series as a whole and then kind of acknowledge a few plot points that might help tie up some loose ends without giving away any spoilers or really ruining the book for anybody that's never read the series. I've seemingly made it hard for myself by talking about the 4th book in a series, but you know, it is what it is. The series is about 3 triplets. There's Catherine, Mirabella, and Arsinoe, and at the age of 16, they must all now fight to the death to basically one of them be crowned Queen of Finburn. And Finburn is this mysterious, fantastical island that's away from what inhabitants call the mainland, which on a boat is not probably very far away. So the island is shrouded by this mist that lets people in, sometimes doesn't let people out, but it's always protected the island, and it's protected the mystery that surrounds Finburn. So this island also holds on, the people of the island hold on to all of these old customs, these old ideals, and so you get a sense that things just don't change on the island. So the people of Finburn can be born with powers. They have poisoners, they have naturalists who have a familiar, very a la Golden Compass. There are elementals who can control the elements. There are people who are skillful at war, people who are oracles. They all live in their own cities. The fate of the queens rests in this final book. There's a rebellion that's been building up since the 2nd or 3rd book, and so finally the queens have to confront that. There are a few other side characters that they meet along the way. Arsinoe's best friend Jules has a pretty big part in this last book of the series. In this final scene in the last book of the actual rebellion from the Five Dark Fates 4th book in the series was incredibly satisfying because it's been building up for ages. The idea of a rebellion going against the crown. I feel like any good fantasy book includes maps. You can't create an entire world and not create a map that goes with that world. I think creative writing 101, world building versus story view, and Kendare Blake does not disappoint. In the first 2 books, she actually includes a map that looks like, in this particular map that is in the first 2 books, it shows specifically Finburn. It shows the mountains, it shows all of the different cities, it tells you which power has a specific city, like for instance Rolanth up at the top is the elemental city, that is where we know Mirabella lives, very detailed. And the crazy thing is that in all 4 of these books, I think we only see a 10th maybe of this island. We never go to some of these places. In the 2nd and 4th book, she actually changes the map to be a little bit large scale. But again, just like I said with Finburn itself, we see all these other mainlands. We only ever really interact with 1 or 2 of them. It makes me as a reader want to know more. It makes me really interested to know other stories. A similar kind of thing that I'm talking about in all of my videos is how adults are perceived in these YA novels. I think that's really important to kind of see the different perceptions authors take with adults. Just the entire series, they're not treated badly. I think they're looked at as somebody to be a guide. It gives off this idea of the younger generation wanting to change the way things have always been done. A lot of the older adults in these books constantly refer to how things used to be, how things have been done. Want to change. That's how a rebellion even begins, is because they want change. So 2 of the themes that I'm going to talk about are mainly bravery and survival, along with good versus evil, which sounds like I'm talking about 4 different themes. The idea of bravery and survival in this is more than just heroes. I think survival is actually really the key player in this, because there's a need to survive. There's a need. Up until this generation, there's only ever been 1 queen that has survived Ascension Year. And so by the time we get to the 4th book, all 3 queens are still alive. They're still fighting for survival, and to the point where they are now trying to outlive more than just themselves. And so one quote that comes from this is, "But nothing is forever, of course, not even on Finburn, where for an age the mist held time hostage itself." So as some final thoughts for this book, I think I read the first 2 books in the series. quickly. They hooked me immediately to go to Barnes & Noble to get the third book. And so I read that equally as fast. And then I actually didn't realize that there was a supplemental book called The Queens of Finburn, and then also the Oracle Queen short stories in this as well, which is kind of right here. It gives a little backstory to things that come up in this, in the fourth book, actually. I think if I hadn't read this before the fourth book, I would have missed out on a lot of little details that I would have had to go back and reread to figure out. And so the fourth book, as a final piece, is really well written. I think all of them are. I think the dialogue is very real, which is impressive with the fantasy world that Blake creates. I felt like I knew the sisters by the end of the series. I wanted to live in Finburn. I want my own special powers. It really gave an entire community-like feel for the island, where I was rooting for the island by the end of the story. By the end, I think one of my favorite characters was actually Finburn itself, because of Blake's writing and how vivid she creates this world. The island was just as alive as any of the queens, which is really refreshing in a fantasy world. I feel like sometimes authors forget to build up the world that they've created, and Kendare Blake does not disappoint. This is a series that I think every person who enjoys world building, who enjoys fantasy, magic realism, it covers it all. And it has a lot of cliffhangers and plot twists and things I couldn't talk about, so I felt like I was being very vague throughout this, but you do get sweet, sweet redemption and relief by the end of the fourth book of the series. It's well worth the wait. It's well worth the read. So pick it up next time you are at a library or Barnes & Noble.